All right, we are recording. Yeah, so chapter 7 is pretty short, only a few pages long. Um, and I do have some notes here. Some are more interesting than others. But one here. So, okay, we get two scenes in it. One is Django admonishing Zam Wessel for not killing the senator, for not killing Padme. But she's like, well, I did blow up, the mission was to blow up the ship. I blew up the ship and everyone on board died. Yeah. Um, and we do also get the explanation here that she is a changeling. But that scene ends with something interesting. Oh, and this is also when Django gives her the centipede things that are intended to go in and kill Padme. But we know from the movie that'll be stopped. And also the fact that she lives, but yeah, anyhow. I just think that this is interesting. So this is like after they have split up, so they're going separate ways. As a Claudite, a changeling, Zam Wessel did bring some advantages to the trade he, Django, had to admit. I find that interesting because of how it makes it kind of clear he doesn't like Wessel. That he doesn't necessarily hold her in high regard. Because the whole, he has to admit it brings some advantage to the trade. Like, without that, he would consider her to be insignificant, I guess. Like, not worthy to be a bounty hunter, at least not like he is. So, yeah, I do find that interesting. Just because of how that is setting up Django, because potentially what that is setting up is that he is this great bounty hunter. But it's also doing so without saying he's the greatest, which, if you looked at the videos for The Phantom Menace, I was so annoyed with the whole talking about how Anakin, oh, he's the greatest, Anakin's so amazing. We get that in 2 consecutive chapters. And then also with Qui-Gon that, oh yes, he's the greatest swordsman in the entire galaxy, so great, and to anyone even challenging him, it's so important, blah, 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 blah. It's like, you don't need to do that. This alone is just establishing that Django is above Wessel, both in terms of this arrangement, but also at least in terms of in terms of Django's interpretation of himself, but is also clad in gray armor that was somewhat outdated, burned from countless blaster shots, but still undeniably effective. The bounty hunters stood easily on the ledge. So this is describing Django's armor. So it's clearly used. He is experienced. So we do have a setup there. He is experienced. He knows what he's doing. And then here, with the whole he considers Wessel below him, that does also raise him up a little bit as well. So it's not saying he's the greatest, but is showing like there's a class difference here. And also just he is a plan. He's calm, and it's like, Wessel, the target was Padme, and you failed there. Whereas Wessel's like, well, the target was the ship. I blew up the ship. What do you want? Yeah. The other scene is where things are a bit more interesting. As far as what is actually written here, not just implying. Anyway, I think I could keep rambling about Django, and I don't want to. I want to move on. So we're in the Jedi Temple, and it's actually interesting how it describes the temple. That basically it is something of a work of art. Art was as much a part of what it was to be a Jedi Knight as warrior training. Many of the Jedi, past and present, considered art to be a conscious link to the mysteries of the Force, and so the sculptures and portraits that lined every hall were more than mere replicas. It goes on for a bit more, but I do find that interesting. Both just the description there, and it does make sense. How art, that art would be viewed that way, especially by a group such as the Jedi. But at the same time, it's like, consider art to be a conscious link to the mysteries of the Force. Art was as much a part of what it was to be a Jedi Knight as warrior training, and yet it's never depicted in the movies, at least. Maybe we'll get some in the book, because in theory that should mean that there should be times that Obi-Wan and Anakin are supposed to be doing some kind of artwork. And it does make sense as a kind of discipline to do that, both as a separating themselves from the warrior aspect, but for other things as well, just controlling the mind, controlling your emotion. It makes sense to have that in here. but we don't get like Obi-Wan does paintings when on his off time, or that Anakin. I'm not sure. Would he be writing books or something? Or actually, no. For Anakin, it could be the art of engines. I mean, he does like building things, and there is a certain artistry to that, or at least they can be. But there's no indication of hobbies for them. And this is like, well, no, it shouldn't just be a hobby. It should be a requirement of their training. So I wonder if we'll see any of it later on. I kind of doubt it, which is disappointing because it makes sense for it to be there. And this statement, therefore, makes sense as well. But I doubt we're going to get a payoff. I do still like the description of the temple in this way. But the discussion between Mace Windu and Yoda as they're walking through is far more interesting, especially for me. Yeah. Masking the future is this disturbance in the Force. Prophecy is coming true. The dark side is growing. I'll get to that. Only those who have turned to the dark side can sense the possibilities of the future. Only by probing the dark side can we see. So this is interesting. I just want to make sure this is the... Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not sure I necessarily like how they are trying to cut the Force in half like this and say that, oh, well, because that's the dark side and it's doing these things, we can't appear there. It's like, Also because it's technically contradicting the original trilogy when the dark side should be stronger than even now because the Emperor and Palpatine rule the galaxy. But there's still the ability to see the future there. So technically this is in error because it is inconsistent. But saying that aside, it still is interesting, this idea that only a Jedi who has touched the dark side has turned to the dark side can sense the future, or at least, you have to bring yourself to the edge of that. I find it interesting because will we get any payoffs here? Because that's quite a setup. So, and I don't remember if there is when Dooku is interrogating Obi-Wan after having been captured. That'll be distance still into the book. I don't remember if there was something with Dooku suggesting that he has seen the future, which would indicate that he at least has gone to that line, if not having crossed it. But I also wonder if we will now get Anakin seeing the future. Like if we have a vision there, more than what we had earlier about him seeing his mother's death. Because that I could see, because of the personal importance of his mother to him, that would allow him to pierce through. But also, it was already set up in the Phantom Menace that he's had a vision like this previously. So I think, no, we don't need to count that one. But if he starts having a vision of the future, then that would start, separate from that stuff, then that might be a payoff for this, that he is turning. But no, the thing that's more interesting is the whole, the prophecy is coming true, the dark side is growing. Because it talks about how, apparently part of the prophecy is that the dark side would rise. Here's the full paragraph. Yoda was referring to the prophecy, of course, that the dark side would rise and that one would be born who would bring balance to the Force and to the galaxy. Such a potential chosen one was now known among them, and that, too, brought more than a little trepidation to these hallowed halls. This is following that basically they have to acknowledge that, yes, the Sith are around. We haven't eradicated them. So I like this because it does at least partially validate the theory that I have about how the Jedi don't like the existence of Anakin because it means that the Sith are there and they are screwing up. It isn't, they are prideful, as I was talking about in a previous chapter. They are prideful in a sinful way, and his existence compels them to acknowledge that. But at the same time, based on statements I've seen previously, they don't acknowledge it. But here, the whole brought more than little trepidation to these hallowed halls is acknowledging that, yes, they recognize that this is a problem. But it seems, what are they doing about it? We don't really have anything. Okay, so do you think Obi-Wan's learner will be able to bring balance to the Force? Mace asked. Yoda stopped walking and slowly turned to regard the other master, his expression showing a range of emotions that reminded Mace that they didn't know what bringing balance to the Force might truly mean. And the answer is only if he chooses to follow his destiny. Um, and then they both just kind of continue walking on, and how they are unsure of things, but how it chapter ends. And there is, though, both Mesa and Yoda heard the ominous echoes of the diminutive Jedi Master's dire words only by probing the dark side can we see. But just, I do like this. Remind Mace that they didn't know what bringing balance to the Force might truly mean. Because that's kind of been the point the last time that I watched through the prequel trilogy, all together. I did watch The Phantom Menace before I started this portion of going through Attack of the Clone. Attack of the Clones. I was doubtful on Clones Day for a moment, but in any case, because when watching it, what occurred to me is that the Jedi are technically in a fallen state. They're not necessarily corrupted, but they are guilty at minimum of a sinful pride. And so they are neglectful, they are vain, and such like that. So to a degree, yes, they are corrupt. I had a better word for it before. I can't think of what it was now. Ah, well. I know it was in one of the previous ones when talking about the Jedi Council. It may have been with the Phantom Menace specifically. But still, it's like they are not what they're supposed to be at the moment. They should be more humble, not prideful. I know I'm kind of going in circles a little bit with that, but it is the whole, there is enough issue here that the whole issue with the Jedi that bring balance to the Force, it does make sense to me. It is fair to me to say that, yes, wiping out the Jedi as they exist also makes sense because they're not balanced. Yeah. So, I do kind of appreciate that because it is some support to that theory of mine. But I'm not certain yet how that is going to develop. Because it could still be that I'm wrong. And it is also one of those, I should maybe look it up to see if other people have this theory. And I know that I've heard it described before that the prequel trilogy is in part supposed to be showing that the Jedi are not perfect, that there are flaws there. But that doesn't necessarily lead to that, yes, the restoring that Anakin becoming Vader and killing, almost just exterminating the Jedi, doesn't necessarily rise to the level of that actually being following the prophecy. That is basically my theory, that is the case. He is following the prophecy by doing that. Even the younglings. As terrible as it does seem, it still is because of how young the training starts, which is so screwed up, and it is, art and warrior training, it starts young. They're kid soldiers, okay? That even wiping them out still follows the prophecy because sometimes that's what you have to wipe out the whole of the culture. It sucks, I know, but it is he's going to an extreme here because he's supposed to be the bad guy. But it is, I've been thinking through for one of my future stories, some of the stuff to have one character do to make him a bad guy. And part of it is, yes, there will be entire cultures where, he would even the kids. And he is very protective of kids. He will kill his own people to protect kids. But I am trying to think, okay, what scenario would it make sense that he may completely exterminate a culture because it's, all the way down. Because, there cannot be a remnant of it. Because potentially they still have been touched and could bring this thing back that is evil. Even to his view is evil. It's like, potentially, even the younglings would need to be eradicated for that reason because their training started too early. So, I know it is dark, I know it is screwy and screwed up, but fortunately, it is just a story. But putting it a different way, even though I know it is wrong, because it's also part of that theory is because the Jedi aren't doing the things to correct, that is also crucial here. Because in theory, if they had been doing it right, if Anakin were treated a little differently, then I don't think he would have fallen. That then the balance would have been achieved, but by changing the Jedi. But because they don't change, Anakin wipes him out, so there is a certain level of Vader did nothing wrong. Not exactly true, but is, like, still, part of my theory there with the whole him eradicating them is part of the balance, is part of achieving that balance. It technically does hinge on his actions can be defended. But that defense then hinges on the Jedi doing things wrong. And I think that we are still kind of seeing that. As I was saying in the previous, well, even here, how these two are talking kind of quietly just between themselves, and that they're still concerned about the whole, oh man, this means that the Sith are out there and all that. But in the previous chapter, how Obi-Wan is trying to handle Anakin and not really doing a good job. It's like, there are issues here that could be handled better, but I think they don't know how to handle it. They are so enwrapped in their sense of tradition and that is right that they don't realize that no, what they're doing is wrong, isn't helpful. So anyway, it will be interesting to continue going and see how things work out. But at least it does seem that my thinking based on the movies, because the Phantom Menace novelization I had read back when the movie came out. I have not read any other novelization. That's the only Star Wars novelization I've read. Obviously, I've gone through the original trilogy novelization. That's done. But these I'd not gone through. So that theory was just based on the movie. So seeing it at least partially supported here, if not validated, I'm kind of liking that. Makes you think, hey, I'm actually kind of decent at this critical analysis of story stuff. It's probably a good thing because I've been writing stories for so long and being critical of other stories for so long. Alright, I think that's all I got. See you next time.